all the people present here, Mr. Minister. I'm Natalia Sokolenko. I'm journalist of Ukrainian radio. I'm going to help you and just try to link to try to connect all the panels. We are going to have very informative sections of our events during the procurement and vendor affairs of the UN. The co-organizers of this event, the UN, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, and the Kyiv Chamber in Industry of Industry and Trade. So our today's task is not only to hear, to listen to the information, but also make acquaintance with each other and meet those entrepreneurs who just are new listeners of those who just heard that they had such an opportunity to make acquaintance with the reps of the UN, ask them different questions, and to take part in networking. So we have a lot of different work, very informative, very let's say informative and productive work, and all the organizers really believe in you and the Ukrainian business. Just your presence in Kyiv, in the capital of Ukraine, following the last night air raid alert in this city, actually testifies to your courage and trust and confidence in the Ukrainian armed forces. Let's give them a round of applause. Yeah, take in consideration that we are living through a wartime. As soon as you hear the air raid alarm alert, so just stay here, stay put. This is can be considered kind of a shelter. So organizers actually took in consideration all the different options, and they actually decide to have our event here. So now we're going to have the introductory panel, which will be followed by the presentations and discussions. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Dmytro Kuleba, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Good afternoon. Actually, I forgot in my car the text of the presentation of my speech, so I'm going just to improvise. I'm really happy and I'm pleasantly amazed that we have so many people here in this audience, and even more people are actually following what is going on here in online. So we would like to thank the UN and the Kyiv Chamber of Commerce for this kind of the synergy of the efforts they pull together. The whole life of my actually, if I'm talking about diplomatic efforts, I was associated with international organizations. Only when I embraced the position of the ministry, I just came to know that the UN is the market for $30 billion if you're talking of purchase and procurement of the services and commodities. So we started to immediately think about that before the war, how we could actually increase the share of Ukrainian business in this realm, in procurement. When I was already Minister of Foreign Affairs I thought that we were going to do everything we can in order to help our Ukrainian exporters so that you could sell more your products abroad, bring here the profits, and create open new jobs here and pay the taxes. I believe this is a fair contract between the authorities of this country and the businesses. We have a certain set of instruments and tools which we as a Minister of Foreign Affairs have set up, let's say provided for the exporters to understand what problem they can approach us with. And the MFA, I mean our minister, to get their highly quality recommendations. We have the different cases when the companies start from the scratch, from the zero exporting level, And we have some cases when this process is ongoing. And honestly speaking, there were some cases where we couldn't do anything because, there is a business of different opportunities and we have to take in consideration. We created an external system, a kind of an online system and service for Ukrainian exporters. And I would like to invite everyone, to open your own cabinet or room. And this is very, very, very simple, kind of digitalized. You can sit in at one end of this kind of a link, and on the other end of that connection line, there is another person who can see your request or your question and can actually offer his help or assistance. And then it turned out that UN is a wonderful partner for promotion of Ukrainian business. That's why I really hope that owing to today's event or function, the Ukrainian economy is going to obtain or find the place or additional markets for, let's say, the sales of the commodities and services Ukrainian producers. Why UN? UN purchases not only for themselves, for their operations in Ukraine. They do that for their activities the world over. And this is really huge, huge market. So I have only one request to you: be to maximum extent attentive and let's say persistent, let's say, and on our hand, on our part, we are going to do everything for the Ukrainian partners to have equal rights with all other their counterparts when they are going to participate in different auctions as represented by UN umbrella. And once again, I would like to repeat myself, and I will put it this way. Okay, I'll put it in different way. Ukraine has to grow a class of Ukrainian exporters. We have exporting companies, but we do not have a class of exporters. I do hope that here in this audience and also in online, we have the people who are going to become the backbone of this exporting structure, let's say, class of Ukraine, which will help our economy to overcome very difficult and complex times. Thank you very much indeed. I sincerely hope that you're going to be successful. Most important, please be safe. Thank you. Thank you. And now I would like to give the floor to Dennis Brown, the UN Resident Coordinator and Humanitarian Coordinator in Ukraine.
Minister, representative of the Kyiv Chamber of Commerce, or really the UN system is here in its entirety, and we're really happy to be here. This is an absolutely wonderful initiative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we want to thank you very much. And it's a recognition of the central place of business, of private sector in rebuilding Ukraine. It's also a recognition of the partnership with the United Nations and an acknowledgement that clearly there's more we can be doing together, and we're going to discuss that today. Last week with the Prime Minister, the World Bank, the European Union and the UN, we launched what's called the Rapid Disaster Needs Assessment, which looks at 12 months of damage caused by the Russian invasion. And we presented it last week, and the news was not very good. Just a couple of highlights that I think are relevant for the private sector. A 30% loss of GDP over the past 1 year. Direct damage to commerce and industry is estimated at $11 billion US. Commerce losses alone are estimated at $85 billion US, and that's huge, and you won't recover that. The estimated recovery needs for commerce and industry is $23 billion US, and this includes reconstruction according to modern European standards. So it's clear that moving forward, enterprises need financing and grants to rebuild facilities, buy equipment, have the working capital required to hire back your employees that you had to lay off and reopen. So the obvious conclusion that we reached last week in this meeting with the Prime Minister is that revitalizing the commerce and industry sector is a priority, and millions depend on this sector for their livelihood. So really, this event is extremely important to the country. So what does the UN have to do with business community in Ukraine? First of all, in 2022, with ILO, which is the International Labour Organization, the UN Development Programme, the International Organization of Migration, all of which are UN agencies, grants were provided to small and medium enterprises, a couple of hundred of them, to allow them to relocate and continue operating. 700 more are planned to be assisted by IOM through 2024. And in our attempts to keep up with your highly digitalized society, which keeps the UN on its toes, a virtual business center was established by UNDP that explains how to do business in the European Union, and a platform which describes how to launch a startup has been used by 10,000 companies and over 200,000 individuals. So we're reaching out through technology. But the second point of why this is important to the UN is we take our responsibilities as an actor in the commerce sector of Ukraine extremely seriously. In 2022, the UN procured over $500 million worth of goods and services in the Ukrainian market. That was during the war, and as the minister said, it was much higher in the past. We buy materials for our large humanitarian response in Ukraine, but also the World Food Programme buys here in Ukraine for our response, but also for other countries in the rest of the world. So it's a very important dual role. And we are pretty big buyers in Ukraine. Third point, not immediately evident, is that through our humanitarian response in 2022, we provided $1.4 billion as cash to over 4 million Ukrainians who are in need of assistance because of the war. So they use that money to go to the shop and buy food and buy supplies for the household and buy medicines, buy whatever they need. That's a huge indirect contribution to economies. Just on a personal note, because I travel quite a bit in Ukraine, and even the communities on the front line, there are always little shops open. And I was particularly struck when I was in Orikhiv in Zaporizhia in January with constant shelling from the Russians, that there was a little market that was open and that people would go to when they could come out of the bunkers. So, you know, for me, the message was life continues and life will continue with the business sector. And you play an incredibly important role, not just here in the capital, but in everything we see in the oblast directly affected by the war. So today, our goal as UN on these two panels is to do a couple of things. We'd like to, in Ukraine, expand our pool of vendors, those we do business with. We'd like it to be bigger. We'd like to address some of the bottlenecks that are there, particularly around the status of our VAT exemption. We'd like to raise awareness of Ukrainian businesses and how to apply for UN tenders. And while we have hundreds of people here and in the hallway, there's also, I think, 500 people online. And we'd like to share our approach to transparency and accountability because UN agencies are regularly audited. Everything we do is checked by independent auditors, and that's extremely important for us. So essentially, our goal today is to demystify the UN and how we work with the business sector. This makes really good business sense for the United Nations, and it makes really good sense for the business sector in Ukraine. And we see this event as the first of many. We'd like to replicate this in Dnipro, in Mykolaiv, and other parts of Ukraine. Humanitarian assistance in 2022 for the United Nations was valued at $3.4 billion. That's a lot of money. And it'll be similar this year. But we'd like to support the private sector so that the humanitarian assistance starts to reduce while private sector and jobs start to increase. And the UN really wants to be a part of that. I'll just finish by saying I'm super pleased to see the ladies from the Mykolaiv bakery who are here. That bakery is supported by the World Food Programme and generated hundreds of jobs and bread was baked for people in difficulty in Kherson. So I'm very happy to see the ladies here today, and thank you very much. Дякую.
Дякую вам, пані Браун.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown, to the businessmen who continue to work in Ukraine. They are really, we are talking about their kind of economic armed forces of Ukraine, special unit, a very efficient one. We are going to continue our welcoming speech, and now I give the floor to Mykola Zasurski, President of the Kyiv Chamber of Commerce. Dear Mr. Minister, dear Mrs. Coordinator Humanitarian Issues in Ukraine on the part of the UN, dear ladies and gentlemen, before starting my welcoming speech, I would like to emphasize one thing. And just amazing atmosphere and environment in this audience, in this room. Why? Because you see yourself. It's not often that you can meet each other. And number two, you know why you came here. And we stand actually a unique opportunity today being here. So on behalf of the Kyiv Chamber of Commerce, I would like to welcome you and say that today we actually, for the first time ever, have launched the Procurement and Vendor Fair, the participation. And it's very important that this event actually we are going to have together with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, UN, Minister of Economy, and the most important with the business community, that we have a packed audience today. And this is the real recognition of the importance of what we are doing together. I would like to say that UN and its agencies are a very important component, element of cooperation, generally speaking, over the world to safeguard peace and security in the world. And different, even the regional offices of the agency also participate in the work along those lines. I would like to say that just quite recently in this audience, we had the General Secretary of the International Chamber of Commerce, Mr. John Denton, and we were talking with him about that. I would like to say that that this event, from the point of view of increasing the awareness of the business community about what they are doing, and actually I was really astounded, I would say, amazed by the figure. I'm talking about our business, which is evaluated the worth of almost 200 billion US dollars, and this is just in the times of war. I spent a very difficult night today. You know that because you were witnesses of the Shahed or the UAVs or drone attacks today, and after the bloody unannounced invasion of the Russian Federation into Ukraine, we live in the very difficult times and circumstances, deaths of the people, and the ruination of different infrastructure in the residential houses, and we are living in the 21st century. I cannot even understand what's going on. I cannot accept that. And the Ukrainian economy has to retune just on the go, so to say, and we try to concentrate our efforts on the adaptation, adjustment of business during this very uneasy and very difficult, I would say, conditions. After February 24th last year, our chamber has not stopped its operation, its work for a single day, and we actively changed. We started to register, to fix all those awful things which happened or took place in Kyiv. I'm talking about ruination, destruction of the, let's say, of the real estate in Kyiv, not only in Kyiv, but in the Kyiv vicinity.
We also document force majeure circumstances, which is very important for businesses. Businesses have their commitments to honor, but sometimes they can't do that because of the circumstances beyond their control. We also summarize proposals and submit them to the government in order to guide them as to how businesses can proceed in emergency. The chamber supported the idea of the green corridor, which is operational, as you, I'm sure, have all learned. UNICEF and other international partners are invaluable in this situation. Members of the chamber joined the initiative, and we managed to deliver to Bakhmut, to Mykolaiv, to Kharkiv, and other localities around Ukraine. Now, however, let me appeal to the Ukrainian manufacturers represented at this fair. You have a unique opportunity to learn firsthand of the procurement procedures of the UN. You can also learn what requirements you have to meet in order to bid in the tenders, and probably start some negotiations with the representative of international agencies. On the other hand, let me also address representatives of the United Nations and say that you have multiple success stories represented here in this room, companies that potentially can be reliable partners for the agencies that the UN acts on behalf of. We are well aware of the fact that we help not just our country but many other countries, nations around the world, which is important, and this is something that we will never resign. Your Excellencies, Mr. Minister, Dmytro Kuleba, let me take this opportunity to say thank you very much to the MFA of Ukraine for their support and our activities and our efforts aimed at making embassies involved in the economical interests of Ukraine. So thank you very much once again for that. You help us, embassies help us, and we can tell that you do whenever we send business delegations abroad. So in behalf of various businesses, let me say thank you to Denise Brown. The presence of UN leading agencies in Ukraine is a signature, as an iconic, so to speak, event for us, and I believe for the UN Ukraine. With this, let me wish every success to the participants and to our producers to find ways to more fully implement their potential. Thank you, sir. Thank you, and thank you all who contributed to this welcome remarks. In a couple of moments, we will have a presentation from Ms. Anyokhin, the analyst, UN procurement, and before she takes the floor, let me refresh the UN global marketplace, that is to say, all the UN procures for its own needs, for its secretariat needs, from as well as from national producers. It goes both ways, so to speak. So it's 30 billion. Ukraine's share last year was half a billion, 511 million US dollars. But far as I understand, the United Nations believe that UN businesses can significantly increase this share, and UN is aware that the opportunities accessible to Ukrainian businesses should be broadened so that there is enough incentives and stimuli around for the recovery of Ukrainian businesses. With this, let me ask Marina Arnochina to come join me on this podium. Marina, if we have some time for questions and answers, I hope you can do that after the presentation. If not, then Marina will be available during networking. Can I have my presentation on screen, please? Thank you. Despite what many believe that our tenders are called having in mind large businesses, large procurements. This is not so. About 50% are medium and small and medium size businesses that bid and are awarded contracts in the long run. This presentation here is to provide you with some basic facts about UN procurement principles and probably share some advice and useful information on select procurement procedures. UN is represented by a multitude of agencies having specific features as far as the procurements are concerned, and even tender platform sites. That said, all these agencies share the same principles of public procurements. The first and foremost principle is accountability, transparency, and, well, good faith. It means that our tender procedures go in strict accordance with the rules available in the relevant resources, and they apply in the same manner to all the participants. As has already been mentioned, one of the features of public procurements is documenting all the steps in order to fix the audit trail, because the organizations use public funds and have to report. Fair and open selection is based upon a wide accessibility of information via tender sites and UNGM, United Nations Global Market, of which you will have a special presentation on. Though bids are confidential, generally, in order to promote transparency, we share information on contracts awarded so that the results of our work can be scrutinized and become verifiable. Next principle of procurements is best price for best quality. Well, understandably, this demonstrates our attitude to the quality of services or goods procured, and so far as we heed not only price, not necessarily it should be the lowest bidder, but to how the goods and services can support performance under the on the relevant contracts, as well as meet the environmental and social as well as other strategic goals. Fair competition, yet another core principle. Our procedures are a reflection of this principle. All the bidders have full access to the tender calls, so that local and international bidders can bid. Tendering sites serve this person. I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that fairness in assessment is one of our priorities. Transparency of such assessments is attached to the requirements as well as the principles that we use in order to assess the conformity. The fourth principle, as important, is abiding by the interests and goals of the United Nations. You know that the UN is to promote common good, public good in the nations where we are represented. Accordingly, all tender opportunities are related to the need to meet the goals of the agencies, organizations, and entire, supporting the highest possible image and name of the organization is also one of our priorities. Another important factor is honoring the interest of all the stakeholders. You may know that procurement principles of the UN are one of the core trendsetters as far as the procurements are concerned around the world. Honoring the interest of the stakeholders means that we will do our best to provide you with the up-to-date and best information for you to be able to bid and represent your company in the tendering procedure. And the next slide, the next part of my presentation, is dedicated to this. The difference basically between public procurement and private or commercial procurement. Speaking of the core factors that determine this difference, the methods of financing and accountability come to the forefront first. Agencies and organizations active in the public procurement operate public funds, donors' funds, and national budgets if they are public institutions. All transactions are subject to verification and audit in order to promote the highest possible transparency. Private, commercial entities are funded privately, and the funds are controlled in accordance with the commercial use thereof. accountability and reporting are subject to the domestic legislation of the registration jurisdiction. The regulations, again, are different as they apply to public and commercial procurements. International law and charter provisions govern the public procurements. Commercial players rely on the domestic legislation of the registration country, as well as their internal procedures and standards, ISO standards, amongst others. Another important factor are goals and motivation. UN and agencies in their goals and motivation are led by the desire to meet its programmatic goals, such as promoting public good and reasonable spending of the public funds, and accordingly the conformity to the procedures. For commercial players, it is efficiency of procedures, maximum profit, and economy. The selection of vendors and competition will also differ, as you understand, because for public procurement, public tenders are a must, as well as adhering to the transparency requirements. Business organizations that may be more efficient do not always resort to tenders. Sometimes they do direct contracts, which is, and last but not least, something that you must be aware of: governance and chain of command, so to speak. We use international platforms and require that documents supplied comply with some standard formats. They are more regulated, so to speak. Commercial organizations can be more flexible with regard to what they require in terms of documentation, as well as the selection of vendors.
Well, next part of information is going to be dedicated to the following: hurricane, and evaluate whether your organization is prepared for cooperation with the UN agencies. The most important issue here, when we contact the local businesses, the knowledge of the local market. The services you provide or the commodities we can actually offer, they have to meet the high quality standards and meet the requirements imposed on the use of this kind of commodity services. The experience of the such, let's say, supply and the international experience testifies to your ability to take care and implement the contract. And actually, everything is aimed at the same goal. That's why we always ask you to share with us your, let's say, letters from the previous customers about the positive experience of your cooperation. Competitive prices are important, but not critical when we are select the vendors. The network of partners is a very important component. If we are buying some complex commodities or services, we actually rely upon that you're going to support us with the maintenance, repair, and your support. And here you need the subcontractors. The human financial potential can be assessed during the assessment of the experience of your company in the tender bid. The knowledge of the cultural context and knowledge of the necessary languages and the language of contract and the English language is a very important factor for the UN agency when you come up with your tender bid. And the last thing, which is also very important, to pay attention and actually to take proper care of the implementation of your contract, because based on the previous experience you can give a good repute and actually show it to the UN agencies, because we usually share the positive experience in cases with our partners, and of course perseverance and patience. You have to understand how difficult sometimes it is to offer your bid for tender bids. I mean, and you have to take care of this process and procedure. It is associated. We just want to make you equal, to provide you equal conditions, and to provide the most qualitative assessment of your bids. And this takes some time. Very briefly about what impacts the type of the procurement procedure, the nature of let's say of of your proposals, and the criticality of your offer. In those who assess your bid, they select the respective procedure from the lowest procedure, request for quotation, and the most complicated to provide the services, which includes the team which is going to implement this task. Of course, there are opportunities for cooperation using the direct contracts, meaning when the company can be hired directly. But due to the necessity to maximize the, let's say, the knowledge of the tenders and the announcement of the tenders, this requires some procedures which are used by those agencies who actually provide a lot of assistance in extreme situations, or who have humanitarian mandate and they need to very quickly support the local population, for example, under the situation associated with some kind of disasters. Practical advice or hints to those companies who are going to participate in the tenders and offer their bids. One of the advice, which is not mentioned here, but I'm going to verbally say that please be very attentive with the tender requirements and announcements. What are the requirements for this or another service or commodity, and give your offer only in those cases that you are absolutely sure that you're the best and vendor can actually fulfill the contract. Since you're talking about UN agencies, you also take the responsibility for the implementation of this contract, which in the future can be very useful and beneficial to the people of Ukraine. For example, help to restructure or rebuild those facilities which are unfortunately ruined now. So be very responsible when you offer your tender bid, and be attentive to what is required of you. Please pay attention to the fact that all the UN agencies have the common requirements for the implementation of the contract. You have to provide that with this at the beginning of providing your bid, and you in doing this you agree to the conditions despite the size of the company, its place on the market, etc. And there is a certain a requirement for a period of time for the supplies or terms. So please be serious about that, because if you fail to do that, it can be the reason for the denial or the rejection of your proposal. Well, I'm not going to talk about all of those advices, but the most important, the price is not the ultimate factor, but at the same time we expect of you the proposal which will reflect the market terms and conditions, so that your organization can use it to the best possible effect. We follow very attentively so that your proposed price meets the market conditions and terms. And the steps towards success as a final stage, the stages which you have to to go through if you're not yet the vendor UN. So analyze the market, find your niche, what kind of services and products you are the best to provide for the UN. Just go to the UN Global Market, UN GM website, and just get acquainted what kind of products, commodities, and services are interested for us and which can be really purchased or procured. On a regular basis, check on those platforms possible tenders just to participate in those. If the website allows you to become a subscriber, so do that to avoid the need to check it personally, and then you are going to get the notifications and the notices about the sector where you are active. The proper implementation of contract is the prerequisite of your future success when you're going to participate in new contracts with the same agency or some other agencies. If you refer to the previous positive experience in your tender bids or offers, so submit your bids and offers in full compliance with what you can see in the tender documents. This is going to be the prerequisite of your future success. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to mention that based on the results of this presentation, perhaps you actually obtained the confirmation that the procedures are rather complicated and to some extent bureaucratic. But after the first two successful tenders, believe me, they are not going to no longer intimidate you and be very useful for you. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm ready to take the questions, if any. Thank you, Marina. Now we have an opportunity to ask the questions from the audience, so please raise your hands. I can see one hand raised, but please approach us closer, or maybe some of our aides can bring you a microphone. So please come closer here. Sorry, I can't hear the speaker. Microphone does not work. Sorry for that. So please speak into the mic and switch on the mic. Turn on the mic. Well, that was a question. Well, actually, you are expecting a comment on my part. Okay. First, which I can immediately mention that in case you wish to participate in a tender, you can see the announcement, and you have a question or questions regarding this or another terms or conditions, and you believe that those terms or conditions are restricting you as a participant in the tender. So please use the contact persons who are actually included in the announcement of the tender. I cannot judge about the tender you mentioned because each organization has their own platforms, but any UN agency can provide feedback for you and to understand whether this condition is dictated by some specific conditions, or there is a possibility to consider alternative options for the submission of your bids. Actually, we started to use more complex modality terms, and we try not to use only those terms and conditions which are accessible to the local business or only to international business. We actually mention or indicate several terms and conditions to take into consideration the situation with logistics, and it's more complicated situation due to the hostilities. So you please use the contact points or contact persons mentioned here, and just provide the feedback and saying that you're a local vendor who cannot actually do your business based on the announced terms and conditions. This can be done on general conditions. You can actually be given some additional condition for the supply, but no, it won't only be used by your company. Your company in this has to be changing the tender document, and this will cover all the participants in this procedure. Thank you. More questions? Microphone, please. We cannot hear the speaker without the microphone being turned on. Okay, there are two mechanisms how we can do that. First of all, in a contract, in some exists the sum of $100,000, and you have announced that in NGM. So we actually announce what contract was awarded to this or another company. For example, the contract actually price for lower sum of money. You can actually get your proposal or send your proposal, submitting your proposal or bid to the mentioned address, and the purchaser, let's say, who is involved in this procedure, will provide you necessary information related specifically to your proposal, your offer, how you can actually improve the submission of your bid or offer next time, and what was the reason for technical, let's say, rejection if it took place. Sorry, again, we can hear the speaker. Well, this cannot be compared to what I mentioned before. In other words, we do not actually stick to the support. Okay, we did not provide the support of Ukrainian business, which lost a lot. There are no access to the funds, etc., etc. That's number one. Number two, today, we analyzed the situation before this event. Today, tenders, for example, were awarded by UN for procurement. Such companies of Lea, Cargill, or others. Those are transnational, international companies with who our companies cannot compete today. And here comes my question: how we can regulate such situation? How we can be on the par with those, just to be, in a sense, competitive with them? Thank you. Thank you for your two very important, interesting questions. First, speaking about the turnover of small and medium-sized businesses. Now, the requirements for the turnovers of the companies, mostly they are dictated by the volume or the scope of the procurement, the level of the risk of such procurement. Why we actually assess the financial statement, or because we understand that the company needs some funds in order for it to successfully implement this specific project. If this project has a very risky, high level risk of the procurement, and we can actually let down our partners and won't be able to fulfill the very important obligations and commitments, we have to check or verify the financial situation in order to ensure the implementation of the contract. We do realize what situation we are living through. The higher we provide the requirements for the turnover, the less we can have quality, vendors products. So we try to mention the maximum possible sum in order to be sure that the contract is going to be implemented. This as refers with regards to the turnovers. At the same time, if you are talking about some specific tender and you as a company believe that the risk is not that high, is, for example, the requirements for the turnover. So you have all the opportunities and chances to write about that to the organization to consider this requirement. None of the requirements is not solid, let's say, or cannot be changed until the tender is closed. So there are some situations we have to introduce amendments or changes just even before 1 week before the closure of the tender, and we can introduce necessary amendments. But at the same time, if we provide your feedback regarding this specific tender, they will pay attention to that. In order to start to change anything, we have to get from you a real feedback regarding the real procedures. This is answering the first part of your question. And the second question. Sorry, can you remind me? Because while we were talking about the first one, we forgot about the second. No, we were talking about the public information of the tender. Not only the companies are big, they're also transnational competition. Well, I have the another question on my part. How big that tender was, and was there a possibility to give a partial bids or not? So the lower the size of the company, we are talking about the distribution of the breaking down of the general lot to give you a chance to submit your offer bid. If you're talking about very high sum of supply or a very sensitive product like grain or other product, we try to do everything to give a chance for a company to make their offer bid. If you can see some of the restrictions for the local small or medium businesses, I really share your opinion in this specific regard. I can only reconfirm that the agency, UN, GM, and our agency I represent, we try to break down the lots in order to give more chances to cooperate with local companies. So this is the advice or the tip in this case to ask you, or for you to ask to give your kind of partial the opportunity to make a partial bid or offer for this SME.
I can still see a hand raised. This is gonna be the last question. However, Marina promised to make herself available. We understand how to bid, take part in tendering. However, we can see requirements to qualifications or goods in the call. What we don't always see is the procedure of performance. Do you have essential terms and conditions, and if they are amended, if I reviewed, what are the grounds so that our community can understand how they can avoid default because of the force majeure? Thank you very much for the question. You could see an answer to this question in my earlier slides. The tendering document set forth some general terms and conditions. This is part of a contract which is an inalienable part of any contract, listing all the essential conditions, including force majeure, advance payment, how we expect subcontracts to be reported on. So this is all in the general terms and conditions, part of any tender. This is maybe included in the document itself or by reference, providing links to the site. If certain things are not explicitly mentioned in the tendering document, you can ask to send you a template so you can see how well payments are broken down in relation to the deliverables. That is to say, you can request this information as a clarification, but I understand what you mean. Indeed, it would probably be better if all the agencies disclose, so to speak, all the terms and conditions and made templates available right away. We have never given it such a deep thought. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, Marina. Oh, I understand. Every question asked can have sub-questions in it. Thank you very much for your cooperation. Very soon we will launch our next panel. Our next panel is largely by the English speakers. You may need conference interpretation, the headsets, and members of our team will try to provide you with your headsets so you don't miss anything. We are almost set.
Отже, можемо
So we can basically start our panel discussion. Let me just make sure there's some water available. Well, I noted that UN public procurement procedures are something that sets the trends across the world. You may have heard about the Bangalore principle of conduct. Another trendsetter for several years. Judges from all over the world contributed to the drafting and shared the best, so to speak, attitudes. I hope that our judges will one day try and implement these standard rules of conduct in their practice, at least until the full-scale invasion. Our public procurement, thanks to Prozoro, were quite exemplary. With this, over to our next panel, doing business with UN. Our panelists are First Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ms. Japarova, and Mr. Kolodenko, Vice President, Kyiv Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and they will introduce in turn the panelists. Good afternoon, Ukrainian businesses and representatives of the UN agencies. I'll be trying to speak slow enough to accommodate the specific features of the conference interpretation. We have been preparing this event for several months now. Before we call our panelists, let me give you some introductions for you to better understand how UN and the agencies responded to the challenges arising from the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation. It was an unprecedented challenge for UN and its institutions. The humanitarian UN response was probably an unprecedented effort ever taken by UN. Last year, on accumulated 3.6 billion US dollars to provide humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Almost 16 million people in Ukraine benefited by different types of humanitarian aid, including food, housing, medicines, healthcare. Almost 6 million received cash benefits in excess of 1.2 billion US dollars. 4.7 million people received legal aid. Over 3 million received assistance related to child rights protection. In this past winter, UN donated 1,600 generators to various facilities, including the IDP compact communities. In other words, UN did what it could to provide fast and effective response. So the first panel has but one goal, something that the government emphasized from the day one. Local vendors, the president, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, all of us spoke in one voice. Wherever possible, procurement should be done from local vendors. And this event is a testimony to the fact that this formula is implemented. Thank you, colleagues. Emine, with this, let me call our panelists, Eunice Takitakis from UNFPA, Douglas Hageman from UNICEF, Silvo Alkebak, she is a representative of the UNHCR, and Clay Govard from UNOPS, and representatives of the Ukrainian companies and businesses, Rikola Elena from Mykolaiv Bakery, Start Symbol Anton from Zanver. Let us all welcome our speakers here. Once again, to reiterate, the goal of this discussion is to enable involvement of all companies from small to large scale to UN tendering procedures. We would like to clarify in particular where Ukrainian companies can have this broader access. Speaking of international procurement rules, let me remind you of our rules. We have an hour to go, so every speaker shouldn't speak for more than 5 minutes. We'll have a timer showing on the display, so When you have just 1 minute to go, you'll be kindly reminded of this fact. So please stay focused and be brief. Our first speaker is Yulis Titache from UNFPA, one of the largest UN humanitarian agencies, providing help to Ukraine and Ukrainians. This past year, 137,000 tons of humanitarian aid have been delivered, including to the hard-to-access communities. So, Eunice, we will once again ask you to tell us more about your mandate, your agency, your best practices, so that the listeners, representatives of the Ukrainian businesses, can get a better idea of how to do it with you. The word is yours.
Thank you very much. I want to say that I'm from WFP. So just to emphasize basically is that one of our main objectives is to ensure that we have actually done most of our procurement locally. So we try as much as possible to ensure that we buy from buy all our commodities from EU and the rest of Ukraine. Basically, so far, we joined in March. And since then, what we have been trying to do is to ensure that we increase our local procurement and decrease the international procurement. What have we done so far? We have ensured that we have bought food commodity 83% locally. Most of the wheat flour that we distribute locally, or 100% of the wheat flour that we distribute locally, actually does come from Ukraine, which is a plus for us. We have also bought a lot of canned commodities, especially canned beans locally. We have also done some purchases, say for example, sugar. Our greatest challenge is basically we have not been able to buy salt locally, but one day we shall. In addition to that, we have other commodities that we purchase, like oat flakes. We also do purchase pasta locally as well. We have worked together with most of the manufacturers here locally, and we have ensured that we have improved the capacity of the manufacturers to international standards, and that has actually been a plus. What else have we done? We have gone to the local grounds. We have gone to the bakeries on ground. Alena will tell you about it. We have ensured that we have tried to ensure that most of the commodity, especially the bread, is bought where it is being consumed. We are still working on that, and that is something that we have actually improved. In addition to that, we have tried to engage the small and medium enterprises by trying to buy the low-price commodities from the SMEs. This way, as we are working with the big manufacturers, we are also working with the SMEs to keep everyone afloat. In addition to that, we are working with the banks, with the retailers, with the supermarkets to ensure that the beneficiaries on ground who do not have access to the markets can actually get money and go into the shops to buy the foods for themselves. So in this way, we are also trying to keep the supermarkets and the retailers on ground afloat. In addition to that, we are trying to ensure that other than buying locally, we're also buying for export. So WFP, in addition to whatever it is that we're doing locally, we are ensuring that our WFP office in HQ or in Rome is actually making some purchases from Ukraine. So far, I can tell you as of 2022, we have actually purchased 748,000 metric tons. And this includes wheat flour, wheat, and yellow split peas. That should be okay, no?
You have a couple of minutes more.
Thank you very much. Okay, so in terms of the suppliers that we're looking for Ukrainian suppliers that are legally registered so that we're able to actually increase our supplier database. We have our greatest challenges that we are facing basically is that when suppliers are requested to do their proposals, they are very reluctant because of the language. So what we have done is we are trying to ensure we send our tenders in English as well as in Ukrainian. So in this way, it increases the supplier database as well. And another aspect that we have actually tried to do is the UN terms of payment is 30 days. Everyone is hesitant to make payments to get paid within 30 days, especially in this situation. So we have worked internally, and we are trying to make our payments within 10 working days. And this is a plus because most of our suppliers now are actually attracted to doing business with us because then our payment terms are actually very short. I would also want to say that what are the challenges that we're facing as well is that most of the vendors are not reading our tender documents right, and they're not providing their proposals on time. We are really trying to ensure that whenever we have a tender sent out, we do call the suppliers, we have supplier meetings, and we ensure that we are able to understand what the challenges are, what they are facing, and this manner we're able to have one-on-one discussions with the suppliers, especially during the bidding processes, to ensure that at least they understand our procurement process, and at least we are able to be able to provide information that is required during that period, and with that we're also getting good offers. However, we still do not have enough suppliers, and that is why we're here, requesting that if you wish to continue doing business with us, or if you wish to do business with us, please just engage us by, we had sent a communication on the email addresses so that you're able to actually share with us your company profiles, and with this we should be able to proceed further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eunice. Наш наступний спікер пан Дуглас Хагеман.
Our next speaker, Mr. Douglas Hageban, he represents UNICEF, and taking this opportunity, I would like to thank you for the Upshift program, which was presented by Orlando Bloom, who came here to visit Ukraine and met with the First Lady of Ukraine. This is the first project to support our youth. When they presented their startups, UNICEF tries to involve them in different business projects and young people, youth. So, Douglas, you have the floor. You don't have the headset, so I can
Listen to you when it comes to the procurement possibilities for Ukrainian business, then a little bit of analysis that goes back to the year 2022 about good practices that you had, and what are your plans for future for the year of 2023?
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today with this esteemed panel and in this forum. And I just want to say, wow, look at the number of people here. Let me be clear. The challenge that we have is not that we're trying to exclude local vendors, by quite the opposite. It's we are trying our darndest to bring more local vendors. We get local context, we get local knowledge of the market, of the geography, and I think we know that we have some gaps in our accessibility, and we'll talk about some of those very briefly. If I can, and thank you to the chairs of the panel for this opportunity. UNICEF's mandate we're mandated by the General Assembly of the United Nations to advocate for the protection of children's rights, to help them meet their basic needs and expand their opportunities to reach their full potential. UNICEF procured supplies are critical in providing for children's health, education, and protecting them from abuse, exploitation, and neglect. In the coming year, our three major sort of categories of programming focus, in addition to humanitarian, which is critical, but we hope the duration of humanitarian support is brief because the war ends. However, our programming areas in large categories are early childhood health and development, to give the most vulnerable children the best start in life, so young children have opportunities to develop in a healthy way, to learn and to play in safety. Adolescents and youth, with the goal that adolescents and youth are mobilized and empowered to participate in their communities and build their skills and advocate for their rights. And finally, better care, where vulnerable children in Ukraine receive family-based and community-based care, and communities are empowered to support them. I'm filtering as I go from my planned remarks because so much has been covered by previous panelists. Our operations, our headquarters is based in Kyiv, but we have a decentralized focus because this is a large country. We have the required technical skills, the human resources, the facilities to support, build, and strengthen partnerships throughout the country. We have offices in Kyiv, Lviv, Odessa, Dnipro, Poltava, and Kropivnitsky, and hopefully more soon coming further east. I think in humanitarian support, it's focused heavily on basic services, but also providing access to services through our Spilno spots where families and children can meet for some safe, informal time, but also, again, as a portal to health services, psychosocial, and other. We've talked about the principles of procurement. They were covered well by the panelist, or the presenter from UNDP. But fairness, integrity, and transparency through competition is important for local vendors because it gives everybody an equal chance. Economy and effectiveness and best value for money. Again, the best combination of price versus quality. If I can just recap briefly, in 2022, almost half of our procurement was done through local suppliers. We bought services, goods in the amount of $75 million, or about 2.8 billion hryvnia from local suppliers. A similar amount from outside suppliers. In addition to that, and as mentioned by others, 306,000 families received cash benefits. Again, this multi-purpose humanitarian cash is then put back into the economy for the needs and the expenditures of people. So in 2023, UNICEF will have similar type of expenditure from last year with procurement in textile products, critical for humanitarian support. We've done a number of winter clothing, blankets, supplies for shelters, but also water treatment, reagents, and chemicals. We're working closely with Vodokanals and their partners. Pipes, valves, and water treatment equipment. School furniture, very critical as we look at reconstruction. Printing and visibility materials. Office supplies, stationery, construction and engineering services. Water trucking, logistics services, and again related closely to humanitarian support is winterization items, blankets, winter clothes, generators, and heating equipment. Just one more thing and then I'll get into some more practical business, and I'm trying to be as quick as I can. As of the first of the year, we have switched our method of receiving bids to an all-online platform. It's not in addition to UNGM. Well, it is kind of, but the registration is done through UNGM. So one point of entry to add your company profile in the UN Global Marketplace, and then our bids and tenders are posted on UNGM, and you can access them, but you make your proposal through a system called Intend. And what that does, it underscores and enforces the elements of fairness and equality, and that UNICEF ourselves can't even see who's offered a proposal, made a bid, or see the contents of the bid or the financial offer until the closing period. The reason that's important is so that you have absolute confidence that your bid is handled equally and fairly with every other potential offer on a given tender. So we think that may be intimidating to you, but trust me, work your way through it and we will help you because it's critical to get your bid in a clean and correct way. I think there's some things we know about doing business with the UN generally, but certainly with UNICEF, is that there might be a feeling that we have preferred vendors or that we've already chosen someone. Not true and not in our interest. That we're too bureaucratic. Yeah, there might be some truth in that. And again, share with us your experiences along the way, and we'll try to address this as much as we can. It takes too long and it's too difficult. Let me tell you, in the past year, when we're procuring, particularly with humanitarian supplies, humanitarian services, we're under the gun and we need to go fast. Now the challenge for us is some of our requirements are complex, and if we don't give a certain amount of time for the process to work, it will be more difficult for you to understand what it is we want, so that you can provide the best possible offer in response to that. So some practical tips that I will offer, and I think they may have been addressed by some others already, but every solicitation we have, and by the way, these will be published on UN Global Marketplace, on the Prozora website, on UNDP's website, and on UNICEF's website. And everyone will have a point of contact, an email address where you can reach out to for questions. Do so. 90% of our procurement and supply colleagues are Ukrainian native speakers. Their job is to help you and to maximize your accessibility to the accessibility of our tender documents to you. Have or invest in a bit of English language capability or have it available to you. Possibly you want some university students, they're very good, I mean, I don't want to be ageist, you see by the color of my hair, I love old people. But sometimes the English proficiency may be better with the less gray hair that is available. Anyway, the reason I say that, there's 5 official UN languages. Our tenders are done almost exclusively in English. But again, we have a number of, all of our supply team is Ukrainian speakers, and they will help you. Yes, not koniec. Okay, just one final point. We have some success stories. They're mobilizing now to become exporting companies, and we hope there are more of you coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Douglas. Наступний спікер – це представник.
Next speaker is the representative of the High Commissioner, High Commissioner for Refugees, Greenberg. You know that with the onset of the full-scale war, 7 millions of Ukrainians became the IDPs, and many millions actually had to leave the country. And this UN agency actually focuses its attention on providing assistance to Ukrainian citizens living and residing away abroad. You have the floor.
First, thank you for this opportunity. It's really great to see this big interest, and we really believe that this will be kind of the first step to increase the local supplier. I hope it will not be the last. So this will be encouraging all of us to do also as all UN together to encourage all the local suppliers to participate more. For UNHCR, our mandate is providing protection and legal service and different protection service, but I will not focus today on this. I prefer to focus on the part which is the interest of all the audience, which is the procurement and the local supplier and how we encourage the local supplier. For us, we focus in our program in Ukraine. We have different programs where we have focus on procurement, and one of them is the shelter. We have big program for shelter and housing unit. We have the program for provision of delivery of assistance of non-food item and co-relief item. We have significant program in 2022, and also we are looking for 2023 for provision of cash. And of course, we have the winterization, which we started last year. And of course, this year also we will be working on the winterization strategy for 2023-2024. So this is the main area where we are focusing on. For shelter, we have different goods and service where we procured last year in 2022, and of course the same or even increase it will be in 2023. We have what we call it the emergency shelter kit. We have different type of construction service, window, door. Now we are investing in new project, a pilot project for prefabricated houses, and the whole project done by Ukrainian company, and we are proud that the staff who is working in the company, the material brought by the company, everything is Ukrainian, and we are looking for scaling up this project for 2023. For NFIs, we have different items. Of course, part of them come from the international supplier, but big part also in 2022, we procure it locally, especially when we talk about generator, heater, different items for household. And of course, to be able to deliver all of that, we have big network of warehouses, transport, and of course, it's all dealt by the local supplier. And everything, almost everything for the running of the operation is done locally, procured locally. For 2022, we almost procure locally more than 30% of our procurement for Ukraine operation. It was procured locally, and it's equal to almost $40 million. While we have also big program for the cash-based intervention, and this inject more than $250 million to the, of course, it's provided to the people, and by that it's also injected to the local market. In 2023, we are also trying to focus more on local procurement, and as I said, we consider this is one of the first steps, because of course we have our challenge to reach the local supplier. They may also have challenge to work with us. So we want this occasion and another opportunity to be able to increase our reach out to the local market. And I think after like 10 months last year, of course we were like, as UNHCR, we have offices even before the war, but after the war, like the program was even increased. So by now we know more about how the local market work, how is the capacity of the local market, which we can see that day by day is increasing. And also the local supplier, they know a little bit more about us, and we are hoping that for the future it will be even improving. For UNHCR, we put our tender in different channels. Of course, one of them is UNHCR website and UNGM, like other UN agency, but also we publish in the local website. And for now, we publish in local website called Zakubki. I hope I'm pronouncing well. But we are looking for extending that to more local website. And the point also for the supplier which we work with before or we deal, when we have any new tender, also we inform them. We contact them direct and inform them that there is more tender coming, so they are informed. Because there was also discussion about the duration, I'm just trying to go to the practical point, not talking about the principle because the colleague already covered it. But also for the duration of the tender, for us within our rule is different based on the value of the tender. So sometimes it could be few days, sometimes it could reach 2 or 3 weeks. So we start with the value of the tender, but after that also we look at how much it's complex, because if it's a tender which we consider it as complex one, we prefer to give 3 or 4 weeks to the supplier, also to give them a chance to be able to prepare a proper proposal for us. For the support of different companies, between big or small company, we don't have kind of a plan how we support the small company or the big company, because we don't have, and we don't want to put limitation that this tender will go to big one or to small one. So our tender is floated, and it's also floated by both language, Ukrainian and English, to be able to reach out to more suppliers. And with that, we try, it's of course based on the project. If it's big or small, it could attract the big company or the small company. But the good part here, even we have many examples for big company who doesn't depend completely on the same supplier, but also recruit or hire or deal with the small company, where also encourage this small company to have a project through their main project. Just to mention about some practical hint, and I will end with this one. First, as I mentioned, we put our tender in different websites. So please regularly check if you are interested to become one of the suppliers for UNHCR. Please check this website. You will always find all our tender in the local UNGM and UNHCR supply websites. It's very important for you to be able to prepare a good proposal, to read carefully the tender document, because all what we need from the tender it is in the document. So if you read it carefully, if you can provide all the document and information requested, if you provide it on time, you will have very big chance to be awarded a contract. And of course, after that, it depends how much your proposal is competitive, and then the implementation of the contract, because as the colleague mentioned, if you have good implementation of the contract, we share reference between each other, so we will know that this company has good performance. It could be also potential supplier for another. And this is all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Silva. Наступний спікер в нас
Thank you, Silva. Our next speaker is a representative of UNOPS. I hope that Anne-Claire Howard will explain this to us and will also tell more about UNOPS's best practices, plans for 23 in terms of procurements. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll try and not repeat what my colleagues have said, because there's a lot of similarities in the way we operate. Thankfully, as UN agencies, there should be a lot of similarities in the way we operate. I think the one difference for UNOPS, which is the United Nations Office for Project Services, is unlike my esteemed colleagues on this panel, we are not a programmatic agency. So we don't focus specifically on children or on food. We were mandated by the Secretary General to look at procurement, infrastructure, and project management in a very broad framework. So we will deliver procurement projects on behalf of our UN colleagues, on behalf of international financial institutions, on behalf of national governments. So as a result, it means we procure a lot of goods and services. Last year, we procured over $1.8 billion worth of goods and services across nearly 1,000 projects in over 100 countries. And we did this by working with you, the private sector, with over nearly 6,000 suppliers that we worked with last year. So what does this mean more specifically for Ukraine? Well, I think if we look at the goods and services that we procure, it's an extraordinarily wide range of goods and services. It can range from health, pharmaceuticals, to engineering, vehicles, office fittings. So I think that's the challenge for suppliers when working with us. We really do work with every potential sector out there and every size of enterprise, from very large organizations to micro, small, and medium enterprises. So it's a very broad panel of suppliers. I think we're very transparent about what we procure. There's a number of things you can look at. UNGM has been mentioned by everyone here, and I believe there's a presentation on UNGM after this, so you'll know much more about that. The other aspect is we try to put out our procurement plans on our website. So if you go to our booth out there, you will find, hopefully, this lovely little piece of paper, which is both in English and Ukrainian, to give you more information on how to actually access our procurement plans. So it won't just show you the current tenders that we have, but it'll also give you an idea of what we're planning in the pipeline for the next 6 to 12 months. So it's not really a crystal ball. There are sometimes unforeseen tenders that'll crop up, projects we hadn't planned on, but it will give you good visibility on what's out there. So over the last few years in Ukraine, one of the big things we're particularly proud of is more than 80% of our procurement for Ukraine has been done with Ukrainian suppliers. And that's something which we want to keep doing, and I think it's something that we will keep doing in the future. But I think the other opportunity, and my colleagues from UNICEF and the World Food Programme have touched on this already, is there's also a huge opportunity for Ukrainian suppliers to provide some of our other projects. We have a lot of projects in this region. We have a lot of projects which require supplies. And I think that by looking at the procurement plans we have in the pipeline, beyond just Ukraine, but looking outside of Ukraine, there's a great opportunity to look at what's possible. So a couple of tips, and I'm not going to repeat the ones that have come already. Obviously, UNGM is the best starting point for most of this. The UNOPS website, like everyone else. Work with the Global Compact. We work very closely with the UN Global Compact, which is another way to get more information about what we do. Visit our website, look at our procurement dashboard, look at what we're looking for in Ukraine, just to give you a little bit of future visibility. There's about $130 million worth of procurement planned for Ukraine up until now. Again, as I said, it may be very different 6 months from now. Mainly around construction, generators, like everyone else. Winterization is a big factor. General facility construction management. We very strongly advocate for the use of local suppliers whenever possible in our projects. We do this by having vendor seminars. This one is a great first step, but we also do a lot of vendor training. If you go to our website, there's a couple of videos and online courses that you can follow in your own time, aimed at demystifying doing business with UNOPS. The great thing is because we all have very similar processes, hopefully if we can demystify UNOPS, it'll demystify everyone else at the same time. Good practices, and I'm going to go down to very basic fundamentals here, but I believe it's really important. Look at all the requirements in the tender documents. From experience, we've seen the vendors tend to focus very much on the technical requirements of a tender, but you also need to look at all the other requirements that are in there. We've seen a lot of very good technical tenders be rejected because other parts of the requirements weren't being met, and I think that's really challenging. I think there, again, the advice from my colleague from UNICEF is very good. A lot of these documents tend to be in English, which obviously is a problem for the UN as a whole. Don't hesitate to get the right capacity to really talk you through these documents. Understands really how points are given, especially when you're looking at a request for quotation. This is a really important factor. Please, and again, it's been said before, but I don't think we can say this too much, use the request for clarification function. Asking questions is not a bad thing. Please, if things are unclear, if you're uncertain whether you meet this requirement or not, don't try and guess. Ask the questions. There are a lot of people on the other side of those emails who can give you answers. Also, be mindful that there are some circumstances where vendors have to be pre-qualified to even be notified of tenders. This is very true, especially in the demining sector, which UNOPS does a lot of work in. For this, you will need to be pre-qualified as a vendor. If you're not, you won't even be aware that these tenders are happening. So these are very important things. Be ready for quick turnaround. We try to give reasonable amounts of time, but unfortunately, we don't always have the leisure of waiting. And if you're not successful, and this will be my last point, please ask for a debrief. We have an obligation to debrief you on why you were unsuccessful in a tender, and making use of that function is really critical for you, A, to try again, and B, hopefully the next time around to be successful. And I'll leave it at that. But please, there's a lot of our staff on the other side of this door, so go and ask questions, and please don't hesitate. Thank you.
Well, let me thank our esteemed representatives of the UNAID agency for their support to Ukraine. We are already lagging behind a little bit and try to cut into the time that local businesses have to close this gap. Well, let me submit that lots of stats comes from procurements done by UN in 2021. Procurements to the amount of $29 billion. Ukraine did $219 million. A small percentage, is it, in 2021? What trends are gonna emerge now? but 0.72% is a success story. Indeed, it's a success story of the Ukrainian companies that succeeded not only in participating but having contracts awarded as a result of those tenders. So please make sure that this success story is, well, success stories are more numerous. We have invited representatives of those success stories. A company from Mykolaiv Bakery number 1. Mykolaiv is a hero city, as it were, and one day it will be officially named such. Ms. Rakova GM. And the bakery itself is a symbol of Ukrainian resilience during the war. So I have a couple of questions to ask of you. To start with, how did you manage to get in touch with UN? Was it them who found you or you found them? Challenges you could have faced, were they scary? How did you negotiate all those impediments? And do not forget that you started off during wartime. Thank you very much for your question, sir. I'll start by thanking all our partners for their trust and will be as brief as you were asking your questions. Indeed, from the very first days of the full-scale invasion of the Russian Federation into Ukraine, we and we all could see Kherson region and part of Mykolaiv were, well, under occupation, were occupied in early March. This means that part of our partners could not buy from us. We suffered a dramatic reduction in volumes and started to do business with UNFPA via our partners. At that time, there were no tenders, so to speak. We were kind of asked if we could deliver so much bread to deliver to the residents of Mykolaiv. We accepted this proposal with great satisfaction and for almost 6 months delivered bread to residents of Mykolaiv. Jointly with our partners, well, we had to bake and deliver, and our partners took the trouble of distributing that bread that was delivered. Bread and food rations, well, if I call them necessities, daily necessities, I will not tell you all. Mykolaiv had never been in a situation it faced in 2022. Later, when only winners were accepted as UNFPA partners, we decided to participate. To this end, we had to register. Upon receipt of the documents, well, frankly speaking, we thought that we would never do that, but the hesitation didn't last longer than a couple of minutes. We rolled up our sleeves, worked on the documents, and asked the Chamber of Commerce and Trade of Mykolaiv to help us with the translation of the documents and their, well, notarization, so to speak. It took us about a month to process the entire package. Then we submitted and started waiting for the registration proper. Registered we were, and then started waiting for the outcomes. We took part in 4 lots, you know. There was one lot for Mykolaiv and another for Kherson, and we bidded only for those regions where we could deliver on our promises. The first lot was 100% success. Now a couple of partners will be subcontracted, so to speak. WFP is one of those partners. Like I said, there's a lot of documents, paperwork, but if you do your work well with regard to the paperwork, you can go on bravely. Plus prices. Thank you very much, Elena. Thank you. And do you have a couple of tips? Well, thank you very much. Let us applaud to this heroic woman and the bakery delivering bread to Kherson and Mykolaiv. Now, let me ask Vyacheslav Chukov, Astata Ukraine, commercial director. They were one of the first to join the Global Compact. Since that, they've been working quite successfully with UN and its agencies. So, how have you been faring, and do you have any tips? Thank you very much for the opportunity to present our experience. Astarta is 30 years old. This year we are listed at Warsaw Stock Exchange, and we later joined UN Global. So we are a public holding, which helps us finding international partners. We do business with multiple governments, international organizations, etc. Starting from the full-scale invasion, we focused as a business represented in more than 62 communities in Ukraine on supporting SMEs, on delivering food. The German government through KfW worked with us. The Swiss government via its embassy helped us deliver 5,000 metric tons of food to our communities. We are a large systemic business, as it were, working with a host of small and medium-scale businesses that are part of our ecosystem, and they are fully involved in many projects we do. 2 figures, over 7,000 people are our staff. We are Ukraine's largest taxpayers for the agrarian sector. This 1.6 billion we paid in taxes is a significant amount. Now, our experience dates back to 2008, so we knew what we'd have to do, and we wanted to involve as many partners as we could, and it's great to see so many people attending this event today. As far as our cooperation with the UN is concerned, key thing I'd like to note is that the quality of what we deliver is probably one of the leading criteria. As a Ukrainian business, Astarta, we strive to be transparent and deliver quality to reduce imports and to not hamper competition inside the country. We are all aware of the fact that our men and women in the military will prevail in the battlefield. Our economy should follow that suit.
Thank you, Vyacheslav. You actually saved us with 10 seconds, but you actually raised a very important trend that any Ukrainian company which was awarded the tender of UN, they will provide jobs for our Ukrainian people. They pay taxes to our budget and support the humanitarian assistance the world over. Thank you. Well done. Now we switch over. I'll give the floor to the last speaker, representative of our company. Actually, we expect that Viktor Shevchenko is the head or founder of this company. By the way, he is the chairman of the Committee for Investments. But Viktor actually joined the frontline troops from the first days of the war as an expert in logistics. So the financial director Tom Symbol is going to represent this company. Company is part on the logistic front from the first day of the war, but they have a long history of cooperation with UN. So what the benefits you got from UN cooperation? What it gives you when we're talking about the implementation of international project? If you have some specific practical advice or tips, so share them with our other companies in this very interesting field. Logistics is usually the last thing. Nobody pays attention to logistics. Everything's okay. If anything fails, then say, "Oh, who is to blame?" Logistics or logistic experts. This is a joke, but anyway, we've been cooperating not so long for not so long time since 2016, and we used to work. We're a big amount of work. We were talking about a small project, and actually it allowed us to approach closer the formalization of UN. I mean, formalization, how we should do our job, how we should communicate, and that was a kind of a test, as it turned out to be, before the beginning of the war last year. UN actually approached us in March last year. Not the first company from the international segment of humanitarian organizations, but anyway, they were the first to call us and ask us to deliver 300 cubic meters of load to. So that was the beginning of our tour, let's say, of the with UN through tenders, review, and other procedures. We've been cooperating since then fruitfully, and we provide a lot of transportation both within Ukraine and international transportation and haulage. And this is not the end of the story. Speaking about the practical tips, I heard, listened to many speakers, and they actually noted down quite a lot some of talking points. But everything has been already mentioned. I could just cross them out. Whatever Marina was talking about during in her presentation, and when once again everybody emphasized that you have to thoroughly read the requirements and the tasks. This is maybe not so important for the companies who have experience with working with international organizations. UN doesn't differ from them. We are talking about a long bureaucratic procedure, but it would be a shock for you if you've never participated in international procurement, kind of standardized international procurement. So this is a must for you to thoroughly read everything. This is not just to mention that. And you have to have several options for development of different events. And you have to know the why you were not awarded the contract or the project. Was it you to blame, or maybe or anything else? If you do not attentively give attention to do not thoroughly read, then it would actually lead to the failure. Maybe you won't get money, for example, not in a few days, but let's say several weeks. So please, in your plans, pay attention to the different possibilities and contingencies. Maybe something will turn in different way as you expected. It's not kind of a remark. This is something which we encountered. And we, as we say, we had to make the same mistakes. As we say, we could just stomp on the same wrecks, But the our error or our mistake, that procedural from terms in terms of procedure, we did not do everything what we had to do. We realized that only when we did some work. So please do not confuse everything. Do not mix everything. Act in a structural way, and do not mix everything in one basket. So to say, each team has to do whatever they had to do. Thank you. We have the microphones. Of course, we save some money at the expense as usual, at the expense of the national business, but not to have the Q&A session. But before we actually wrap up our panel, we have a small intervention to be offered by.
One of the challenges that you will be facing as suppliers working with the UN is the acronyms that we use. So we do have very many acronyms. We have WFP, we have UNFPA, we have UNOPS. And at one moment in time, you will speak to someone, like say, for example, when I'm calling Elena, I'll tell her, Elena, this is Eunice from WFP. I'm calling in regards to a RFP that I sent to you. Elena will be like, who is that? What is that? So basically, you will be facing a lot of these challenges. And with time, you'll be able to learn all our acronyms. And it is actually a very fun way to actually do the business with us. So,
Thank you.
Шановні колеги, ми
Esteemed colleagues, with Ms. Emine, I would like to thank the representatives of our agencies, UN agencies, representatives of Ukrainian business for your work in supporting the humanitarian and economic situation in Ukraine. Definitely, we all have understood that each participant has a lot to say. That's why we actually generate a lot of common ideas together with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, which became kind of a driver of acquainting our business with the possibilities and opportunities of UN and the UN agencies. But this requires future systemic work when any situation can represent themselves individually, how to actually to generate such contracts, how to prepare them, and believe this is just the beginning of our work. Thank you, Volodymyr. This event was meant for you. We wanted to make it most practical as possible. I mean, there is a great potential in your cooperation with UN. As Mr. Kuleba mentioned, that the part of the Ukrainian procurement in UN, it's not shouldn't be made only locally, but this can bring us to the victory of our economy. We'll try to find other formats. So we are waiting, expecting your feedbacks and proposals, your ideas. Think what would be best, speaking about the various formats for you to get the best possible information most required for you. And as my colleague said, you have to thoroughly read everything and not to be afraid of that, because when we enter the system, you cannot leave it later. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists and moderators. A very important announcement, housekeeping issue. Dear colleagues, we are going to continue our work without the coffee break because we are a bit out of our time schedule. But this is not the most extreme test for us. We are going to postpone coffee break to the networking session. Now I would like to invite here the moderator of next panel, Artem Rybchenko from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. You have the floor, Artem, and business with Ukrainian companies, benefits and challenges. You are going to announce the participants in this panel. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues, friends of Ukraine, our partners. This is a very interesting discussion. It's not only the expert discussion, but also practical. We are going to continue along those lines further on. And I'm happy to invite here for the next panel, the partner for Ukraine, the director of the World Food Program in Ukraine, Mr. Matthew.
Оплески, можливо.
I believe he deserves a round of applause. I'm also happy to welcome Hanna Rudnikova, representative Minister of Economy of Ukraine. Tetiana Grechana, representative of the State Tax Service of Ukraine. And I'm happy to welcome representatives of business, specifically Mr. Volodymyr Marcenyuk, the managing partner of Textile Contact Household Textile, and Ruslan Ilchov, general director of the Federation of Employees and Employers of Ukraine. It's my pleasure to see here also Mr. Andrei Melchenko, the department head of the department of the Kyiv University. And taking into consideration our the program, I would like to invite here representative of the Minister of Finance of Ukraine, if it's possible. Thank you. Good. It has been very interesting today to hear some practical steps of cooperation, and it's really gratifies my heart to realize that today, during the second discussion format, we have here representatives of these state authorities and business. We have the partner institution, and of course we are going to have a very interesting expert discussion in the second part of our panel. So the first floor is given to Mr. Matthew. Very often we know and we hear when we are talking about Ukraine, we are talking about grains and brains, brains about IT sector and grain agricultural sector, and very often we cooperate with our international partners. We would like to hear from you as a rep of a very respectable institution. What are the positive trends of cooperation with Ukrainian business, and what are the challenges at the same time? Because business is always means different conditions of labor and different terms and conditions depending on different sectors. It would be very interesting to hear what you can share with us, and we actually address all the panel members to keep time.
I would first of all like to say how happy we are to see so many companies, so many businesses here today. We are, as part of the United Nations family, in awe of the people of Ukraine, of the businesses of Ukraine, the commercial sector. You have shown resilience, you have shown fortitude, you've shown bravery. You only have to look at Alina from the bakery in Mykolaiv, my great friend. You know, people who have served their economy, served their people since the time of this illegal invasion, since the time of the occupation of this country, and continue to do so, because this is a war on Ukraine, it's a war on this economy. And when we are trying from our humanitarian role to provide support to the most vulnerable, to provide support to those greatest in need as a direct consequence of war, we're also trying to do it in a smart way. We're trying to do it in a way that supports the jobs of this country, so that families can put food on the table for their children to eat, they can live with pride and dignity, and continue to serve their nation through the commercial sector. So again, let me just say, we are in awe of you, and we are delighted to be partnering more with you. Since last year, since the World Food Programme returned to Ukraine. We didn't have an office here on the 24th of February. When we returned, initially, the vast majority of what we were doing in this country, and clearly it's in the name of the organization, we're the World Food Program. We're providing food assistance to vulnerable people across this nation, 3 million people each month across this nation. When we arrived, most of what we brought with us from outside. We were buying flour from Turkey, oats from Turkey, spaghetti from Poland, tinned meat from Romania. Today, 83% of what we distribute across this country is made in Ukraine by Ukrainians, bought from you, bought from companies that serve this nation and actually ensure that this nation feeds itself. But not only itself, feeds the world. In 2021, we bought 879,000 metric tons. We're a very significant part of that $200 million worth of business externally to the UN in 2021. Last year, even with the closure of the ports, we still managed to export almost 500 and something thousand metric tons of food from this nation. And we will continue to do that. And why do we want to continue buying in this country, from this country? First of all, you are phenomenal growers of food, and we fed 158 million people in 83 countries around the world last year. And this is the breadbasket of the world. So we want to continue to support Ukraine, even at times of war, to continue feeding the rest of the world. And we will continue to focus our energy on ensuring that when we look at wheat flour requirements in the world, when we look at wheat requirements, maize requirements, sunflower oil requirements, that we continue to buy from this country. And we want to do that because the quality of what you produce beats most requirements in the world. When we look at our own operations here inside Ukraine, the speediness of you supporting us, providing us with food so that we can help those most in need, the speed that we can do it is much faster if we buy locally. But there is a challenge. I talked about speed, I talked about quality, I talked about availability. It's not always cheap. There's a challenge. Part of the reason it's not always cheap is because when we buy from Ukraine to feed people in Yemen, when we buy from Ukraine to feed people in Somalia, when we buy from Ukraine to feed people in Kenya, it's value added tax free. When we buy food to feed people in Ukraine, we pay VAT. And that means frequently it's not as cheap as it could be when we're looking at international markets. We want to work in a better way to have VAT exempted up front when we buy food assistance. And I'm sure other UN agencies would agree when they buy services and goods to support people in this country. If there could be a means to exempt value-added tax up front, then it would actually mean we would have more funds, more resources to actually serve more Ukrainians across this country. We are also, in terms of challenges, we know we are complicated to work with. We've talked about it, and you've heard from Douglas and from others, from Eunice, that we have our own hoops to jump through, our own I's to dot and T's to cross when it comes to the complexity of our contracts. All I would say is bear with us. We need your support, and we are ready to support you through sensitization, through discussion, so that we can ensure that you can meet our standards, because our standards aren't for negotiation. We have executive boards that make us guarantee the level of transparency and accountability and the competitiveness of the way we manage our vendors around the world. We can't change that. We can't waive that. We can't break our own rules because those rules are global. But we can explain them to you. We can help you. We can show you how they can be worked with. And lastly, My organization acronym, we talked about acronyms, is the World Food Programme, WFP, which can mean wait for payment. Oh my goodness. The UN isn't always as fast as it should be at paying. But as you heard from Eunice, we are trying to do everything in our power to pay for services and goods that we receive from local companies as fast as we can. We've gone from a 30-day payment period after the receipt of the goods or service to a 10-day payment period. We will try to do that even better because, you know, liquidity is critical for you, it's critical for us. One of the challenges that I find already is that many of our vendors ask us for advance payments. You want prepayment for services rendered or for goods provided. Prepayment is outside of the UN's standard system of payment. So we need to see how we can find ways to perhaps break our contracts into smaller pieces, pay the tranches in smaller tranches, speed up our payments, because we need you to be successful. We need your companies to have liquidity. So we have to find ways to do that, but at the same time, not harming and not breaking our own rules. I've got to stop because I've got over time. But again, let me just end by saying it really is, you know, a great pleasure to work more with you. We are absolutely guaranteed that our engagement across the whole United Nations is sincere when we say we want to do more with you, with local business, to support the domestic economy at what is the greatest challenge to this nation that you've faced to date. But we are going to be here to continue to support you, and we are going to improve as time moves on in the way that we work with Ukrainian commerce, Ukrainian business. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's always about teamwork. Як дипломату,
Teamwork as a diplomat, as an Ukrainian, I am so excited to hear it from international partners that Ukrainian businesses are reliable partners, are good partners, and in these times of hardship, we honor our commitments. Recently, we started speaking about recovery of Ukraine, not just agribusiness or power grid. SMEs, they too have to be helped to recover, and the government and our international partners should be a reliable partner, friend for Ukrainian businesses. So let me ask you, how can we be of greater help? VAT was mentioned, legal framework too. The institution that you are representing, how does your institution think we can be a reliable partner to Ukrainian businesses? Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Nowadays, government and business should work hand in glove in order to help Ukraine prevail. The tax service is an open agency, so we are trying to find solutions to any issues, problems that you face, and there may be some problem issues here and there. We recently had a meeting with the MFA in order to improve compensations to representatives of international organizations. So I would once again like to emphasize that we are open to a dialogue, to fruitful cooperation. Now, let me also mention that we have seriously streamlined our procedures, but we understand that there's room for improvement, and we'll be listening to you. Our international partners will likely help us align our operation with international standards. With regard to VAT, something that the audience and our international partners are quite concerned with. Anything you can update us on? Well, there are two aspects: reimbursement to Ukrainian taxpayers and, on the other hand, reimbursement to international organizations. They are two different procedures. Taxpayers act in accordance with the Ukrainian tax code. International partners do that in a special way. As far as the Ukrainian businesses are concerned, the half-year period of delays is now over. In March, we reimbursed, I'm sorry, as you were, we've verified 10.2 billion and wait for the Treasury to reimburse. As far as international organizations, again, there are some verifications and to be done. As far as the Ukrainian taxpayers are concerned, you can access data as of the first of each month on the website of the Ukrainian tax service. Thank you very much for this update. With that, over to private businesses, to private sector. The armed forces of Ukraine that we have mentioned today on many occasions, and so there's entire sector of entrepreneurs, employers, as it were. Ruslan, what can you say about the situation of Ukrainian employers? I know that you have a presentation with you, so what would your advice be for all of us in 2023? Thank you very much. A year ago, as far as I can recall, almost every second business member of our federation, and there are over 8,000 of us, suspended its operation. We could see the more humanitarian aid provided to Ukraine, the more limited operation of Ukrainian businesses. That's when we came up with this slogan, how support Ukraine with Ukrainian goods. ILO was one of the first when they started buying food boxes from Ukrainian manufacturers, then household goods followed. So when humanitarian items are procured in Ukraine, we first help individual people, and second, which is as important, we help Ukrainians find jobs and provide for their families, which is very important. Thousands of Ukrainian producers can manufacture quality goods and services for UN. This also is a plus. It's not just price we could hear today. It's life cycle, it's payroll and social responsibility. Second, return of refugees to their homes and support to the armed forces through generation of taxes. You may be aware that our taxes are used to finance expenses for the Ukrainian armed forces. We have different goods, food, household, hygienic kits, light industry, starting from bed covers to clothing, bed linens, etc. Construction materials, furniture, well, elevators, anything you need to renovate damaged housing, heating, power generators, pharmaceutical, 75% are still operational. We manufacture a full range of medications and are ready to deliver special machinery, public transit. Last summer in July, 10 ambulances were made by a Cherkasy-based Polycar on commission from UN. By the way, this fire truck, we managed to localize it just in under 4 months with Suzu of Japan. So as businesses, we are ready to provide for those who procure goods to deliver humanitarian aid to Ukrainians. Once again, by buying Ukrainian, today we not only support Ukrainian businesses, but also wherever it goes about UN contracts, about building trust to Ukraine. Later on, our exporters can flourish. Thank you very much for a very succinct and example of how we can move on and help Ukraine economy grow. UNICEF, thank you for supporting projects implemented in Ukraine, and here is one good example. Domashny textile contract. Sir, could you tell us about any challenges you had and the results you can boast of today? Something that can help others join programs of this description. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to address this audience. The items on today's agenda are of importance for every Ukrainian. The war has been raging for the second year now, and I would like to appreciate assistance provided to Ukraine by its international partners. Ukrainians can have access to this assistance. Far as far as we are concerned, we focused a lot in our activity on IDPs. We have amassed the relevant experience starting March 2014, when the armed conflict in Donbass started. Lots of persons were displaced, and once we were introduced to the UNHCR, this was our first contract. Yes, there was a lot of challenges in processing the paperwork, but we managed. Today, some contracts need to be fulfilled immediately, and this was the situation back then. We sent pillow, bed linens, mattresses, and other things like that to meet the needs of IDPs, and it was this contract that started us off on the road of cooperation with many other agencies. More than 50 international funds that are helping Ukraine today. One of the important milestones goes back to 2018. It was a pilot project by UNOPS. It was the baby package project, also interesting thing. On August the 31st, 20 p.m., 100 hours, a contract was signed with UNOPS, providing for delivery to start September the 1st. 8 hours to go, not a lot, but we managed. We succeeded and supplied 100,000 baby kits after that, and we thank UNOPS for that, and I hope that we'll be having other opportunities like that with you in the future. Speaking of today, let me mention another examples of us working with UNICEF, a big contract, probably an unprecedentedly big contract. In 4 months, we had to manufacture and deliver 121,000 packages of winter clothing and footwear for children. We again succeeded because of the organization's very flexible attitude. The project was to the tune of 800,000 hryvnias. No textile manufacturer could afford that. We invited over 60 partners to help us with the project. Light industry, footwear, logistics, packaging, over 3,000 persons were involved in the project, and some of the jobs were created. By the way, the thing was over just 3 weeks ago. We are looking forward to new contracts, and you watch out. UNICEF is calling tenders for food, clothing. I hope that everyone has a chance. Only perseverant ones are likely to succeed. Thank you very much for giving us a brief description of your business and success, inspiring. In 2022, when I represented Ukraine at different gatherings, I was asked, how come Ukraine, facing the military aggression, managed to work? The economy didn't stop. On one hand, the credit should go to the professionalism of the government, its officials. Second of all, the businesses involved and our international partners who help us bridge communication gaps. The Ministry of Economy team was very active, that of MFAs. We working in sync with our international partners. Anna, as a representative of the Ministry of Economy, could you share some of your impressions of 2022, your plans for this year of our Lord 2023, and how do you assess the economy of Ukraine?
Thank you. Indeed, that year was very difficult for all of us, and we understand that the economy is the second front of our country until we are capable to provide for our defense capability in the front line. And of course, the economy of the country depends directly on the subjects and the entities who fill this economy, and we are grateful to all our colleagues who presented their success stories regarding the production capacities which remain to work here, which provide the jobs for the people who reside and work here, who actually pay the taxes to the budget which are used then for the defense and social sphere and to support the economy. In the context of the further development of our economy, perhaps we focused our attention on the issues of recovery and reconstruction, because this is the means to reconstruct the country, to rebuild and recover what has been ruined or destroyed. On the other hand, this is a chance and the opportunity to build the economy at the same time. In this specific case, the public procurement of the cost maybe of donors who are going to provide financing for us after the victory more and more. Then this is the tool which is going to actually ensure the blood circulation of the economy of this country and to provide the regions most affected as a result of the war to restore and recover their entrepreneurship, their production facilities, and together with the building of the houses, we should take care of the growing and increasing the big number of the entrepreneurial businesses and who are going to participate in this kind of recovery. I'm a representative of the procurement as the Minister of Economy. I have the plans, and I intend to tell, when I tell you about the plans for the recovery and the reconstruction of the country, using the funds which are going to be allocated by international banks. Maybe somebody doesn't know. We have a wide spectrum or gamut of the, let's say, donors, European Bank, EBRD, and all of the other banks, and all those donors actually they establish their own rules of the game. So in order to become part of the tender of the international, this or another international bank, we have to follow to meet their rules and regulations. In order to have access to those funds for the national producers and manufacturers, we believe it to be the procedure for the donor expenses to do through the platform Prozora, which is well known to many businesses and national producers, manufacturers, and companies. And using this kind of transparent tool to provide access to the donor funds, this will become the powerful stimuli impetus for the further development of the localized Ukrainian business. Now we are at the stage of technical implementation or realization. The first willing became to be the World Bank, who actually provides the technical statement, and we try to take care of the kind of the combined procurement. They have different stages of this process, but each of them have some specificity. For example, the submission term 15 or 30 days, and following this procedure, we try to give the opportunity to all those customers to use the system Prozora to show their procurement. And then, based on the general understood requirements, we could then actually be awarded the contract and meet the challenges we face. One of the most important means of development of the economy is through procurement. We also, in this context of procurement, we plan to develop much required business tools in the instruments which are not used yet in the procurement sphere. We are talking about the cost of this cycle, life cycle. This is a very important instrument, but it's not used in the public procurement because it's a complex and makes provision not only for the value, let's say, or the cost. For example, when we buy a car, we have the consumption of gasoline, which is also taken into consideration. The more expensive is the gasoline, the more costly becomes the car with time passing. But this instrument is used in different procurement. For example, if you're talking about the electric appliances, or which require some warranty, maintenance, or whatever else, all those costs which has to be built in. Let's say you're taking into consideration if you're talking about the procurement of this or another item or commodity, they will be also included there. So this method of evaluation, we have to sum up all those costs and compare what would be cheaper, the proposal A with all those expenses. But this instrument deserves to be further developed, and I believe that soon we'll have a pilot project for this implementation of this or the application of this instrument, because it's well spread and used in the business. It's much required and understood. It has its clear effect, but so far we didn't have any examples of using this instrument or tool in the public procurement. Thank you very much. Very interesting information. We have an update of our business. We face different challenges, so we use new tools and instruments and new approaches. This is also very important because the world changes, the business conditions change. And from the speech of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Kuleba, we heard that Minister of Foreign Affairs gives a lot of attention to the economic bloc, and we are involved in very active preparation regarding the conference for the recovery of Ukraine, which is going to take place in London in June this year. That's why the private sector will be in the focus of the attention of our partners. We are going to actively represent our business for our international friends. We heard today during this panel the position of our state, the experience of the mass accumulated by businesses. It was very interesting to listen to the vision and the assessment of representative of the scientific and expert sector. In this specific case, our expert Andriy. I am talking about your visions for today and tomorrow. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to speak here. Esteemed colleagues, during this meeting, I represent the expert society environment community. The lawyers have the following joke: if you do not know the legal rules, you have to know the place and the source where you can find something. But where we have to find these sources to be guided for the Ukrainian business and to be successful in the procedures of procurement. First of all, this is the behavior code of the vendors of the UN. I'm going to give a few examples, new sources, general provisions and terms and conditions of UN regarding procurement of commodities and conclusion of contracts for providing services. Number 3, financial provisions and rules and regulations of UN approved back in 2013 13 2018 in a new revised version. Another important source is the UN Convention on the international sales, procurement, and sales of commodities, and the terms which were mentioned today during the main presentation today. Speaking about the Ukrainian legislation sources, this is Civil Code, the Tax Code of Ukraine, the Customs Code of Ukraine, and the law on the foreign economic activities. Important source for Ukrainian business may become the, let's say, the handbook of UN for procurement, which is permanently updated by this organization based on the changing circumstances. I'm talking about the business conditions changes. It's constantly is being updated. It contains systematized information regarding the regulatory aspects and the procedural aspects, the procurement procedures. I would like to note here that the main structure which carries out the function of both expert and consultant in the sphere of procurement is the Department of Procurement of the UN Secretariat. United Nations Procurement Division. Pay attention to the site of the structure of this organization. It contains a lot of practical information. Also today, during some of the colleagues mentioned that one of the main platforms is register of the UN vendors. UNGM, United Nations Global Marketplace. This is the major register of the vendors, which contains also the information regarding the participation in the procurement procedures, and accordingly, you should pay attention to that. And actually, this platform actually is based on the principle of the one window. And you actually can address that platform with all your questions you may have. And our colleagues from international institutions and organizations who spoke here today, they repeatedly mentioned that this process of cooperation is not something fixed. This is a live process of dialogue and discussion with the parties to that may and must actually enter this, join this discussion and put the practical questions aimed at its let's say general resolution. And those norms are quite flexible, despite that we have a lot of bureaucratism in good sense of that word. We have to have such bureaucratism, but when you overcome this, you feel yourself free as a businessman and participant in this procedural process. It should be also noted that some of the UN agencies have similar platforms which reflect the specificity and specific features of procurement in the sphere of the activities of those individual agencies. And if you're talking about the procurement procedures, if you're talking about those agencies, you can acquaint yourself in the special reference book of UN, which can be freely accessed. And also, I would like to talk about the factors, not the factors of problems, the factors of some kind of restraint or something like that, or problems which we have to take care of in our road to that. The issue of lack of awareness or information of Ukrainian business regarding the regulatory basis of UN, which is a component of the law of international organization, and synchronization and the use of those norms and their harmonization with the legislation in Ukraine. This can be done. We heard today a wonderful experience of the producers of the commodities and providers of services to Ukraine, who proved with their practical steps that this can be realistically done. Number two, the need for high quality marketing and research of the market of Ukraine. Market of commodities, products and services of Ukraine. The need for high quality risk management. when selecting the vendors or suppliers of different the providers of the products, commodities and services which originate in Ukraine. As regards the legal practice and organizational practice, which require the harmonization at the practical level, harmonization, synchronization, and the use of these typical UN contracts, both in terms of their content and the procedure of their conclusion. Today we already heard the question from the audience that regarding the terms and conditions of such contracts, which are well reflected in those contracts, which are component of the general provisions of UN regarding the conclusion of contracts for providing services, which I already mentioned today. Also, I would like to mention the issue of VAT. Our colleague aptly answered the question regarding the exemption, not the exemption, let's say the upfront payment of this tax. Not from, I would like to approach that not from this point of view, but formation of prices by Ukrainian producers and manufacturers as compared to the prices which could be offered by the manufacturers of commodities and providers of services in other countries. We heard repeatedly today that Ukrainian commodity manufacturer competes not only with Ukrainian manufacturers but also with the manufacturers from other countries, because this is a global market. So this cooperation is really an important message for Ukrainian business regarding the opportunities to enter the global markets through procurement of commodities, products and services in the UN system. So one more thing which I would like to touch upon. In the 97 article in the Code of Ukraine, if you're talking about VAT, we are talking about the services which can be exempted of VAT, which are involved in the international assistance or humanitarian aid. Perhaps we should theoretically, potentially consider the opportunity to implement such a proposal so that the provision of commodities and services which are going to be procured within the framework of procurement of the UN organization's framework, I mean, to apply the zero rate according to the tax code of Ukraine, the above mentioned Article 5. This will provide more opportunities for the Ukrainian manufacturers to entertain more competitive prices, because we heard today that the main important is the competitive price. In conclusion, I would like to say that our today's meeting has a big importance not only for Ukrainian businesses but also for Ukrainian education and science, because we are followed also by the students and departments, the international relations departments and legal studies departments, and also the scholars and scientists in these various spheres who are going to further develop these directions in their researches, and expert researchers included in their future work for the benefit of our country, our state, in order to make our economy more strong and powerful. Thank you very much, Andrei. Very interesting and practical information. And definitely, if we're talking about the lawyers and the legal experts, is no less important than other participants in our panel. We'll still have time for 2 more questions, so please, taking this opportunity, well, we do not have that opportunity. So in conclusion, I would like to address our guest, Mr. Matthew, and say that Ukraine places among top 10 vendors of products speaking with you about your programs, how we should do, what we can do. So for Ukraine, it ranks among the top 5 partners, and we would appreciate your very brief, informative answer to that question.
One of the top 5, not only in the top 10. Wow. Well, look, I think I've worked in maybe 9 or 10 countries around the world over the last 20 years with the World Food Programme. I've worked with Ukrainian aviation companies. I've worked with Ukrainian manufacturers of food products. I've worked with traders from Ukraine, large companies that have provided food commodities. I've worked with companies that have built us all-terrain amphibious vehicles, I'm sure you might be here today, that we use to deliver food all across the hardest to reach areas of Africa. I've worked with Ukrainians everywhere in the world. And everywhere that we've worked with companies from this country, we have always had excellent service, excellent quality of both commodities and services, and we've maintained long-term relationships. I think what, in what is a horrific circumstance right now, the United Nations has an opportunity, as our last speaker said, to really open up those relationships to a much bigger group, a much bigger community of commercial service providers in terms of goods and services. So I think we need to look at this opportunity to serve both the people of Ukraine today, but also to look at how businesses in this country in next decades to come can have a much closer relationship with the United Nations as a family. I said earlier, it's a terrible thing to think of. We served 158 million people last year around the world. That's a truly frightening number, because it means that the levels, I mean, in terms of the World Food Programme, the levels of food insecurity and food need in crises well beyond this particular one is so great right now. We need to ensure that if we're going to be able to serve people in those countries and make a change to their lives, we need to work with the very best. We need to work with companies that can provide a level of service that not only, has an immediate impact, but long-term impacts, not just from a humanitarian perspective, but from a development perspective. So please take the opportunity to meet with the agencies, the funds, the programs that will have stalls outside, that have people here today to meet with you. Take a moment to listen to them in terms of what are their needs, what are their interests, where there are opportunities for you to partner with those organizations, because although this is the first of many, it's a unique opportunity to meet face-to-face with people from UNOPS, with people from UNICEF, with people from WFP, with people from all of the agencies, IOM and others that are present outside of this office. Because it can mean a long-term impact on your businesses for the future.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, timing and protocol, it's always a challenge. But thank you so much. І дуже дякуємо нашим панелістам.
Thanks again to the distinguished panelists, to members of the audience, and I would second and encourage them to use every opportunity open to them here. Glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. Our next session is online, the presentation of the UN global market, this $30 billion worth market this year. This presentation will be done by Neil Saram, who is UNGM program manager. We can see our distinguished presenter. We can hear him as yet, but I hope we will in a sec. No.
Let's start, please. So, there's one thing very much to find the thinking with you and to speak to you on there is quite a bit of thing. Well, I think that's it. No. And speak to you on the United Nations global market. So in other words, how do you go about becoming a vendor to the United Nations, or the organization of the United Nations, and the system that the organization used to do? Just a moment. There we go. Right, you've seen started today. But as you know, the United Nations market, European market, worth roughly $2 billion on an annual basis. It was in 2021. This has been growing over the last years. And as you can see here, as you heard as well, the market consists of a multitude of techniques as well as a vast plethora of different services required. Now, incidentally, this slide, or this and data that I'll be throughout the section, comes from annual statistics group, which you can also find on the United marketplace. We'll talk about that a little more detail. Шановні колеги, перепрошуємо, у нас виникли технічні проблеми з цією презентацією.
Now, in terms of data from this is the 2001 here in the
Sorry, Mr. Ram, we don't hear you in Kyiv.
We don't hear you well, Niels. Can you put some headphones on, please?
Actually, a little louder with the mic. Does that work better?
Yeah, because there's some. Yeah, if you could talk closer to the mic, maybe that will help.
Did you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead now.
Okay, right here. Well, as I was saying, the volume, the procurement volume for Ukraine in 2020 is roughly about 214 million, procured by 52 agents. You can also see back then at the time, at the end of 2021, around about 1,500 companies, Ukrainian companies, were registered in Ukraine. This has now grown to 2,000 over the last year. Now, the United Nations, as you've heard, most likely heard today, is not a single organization. It is a plethora of a number of organizations. And this, it can be quite daunting when first wanting to go into business with the UN. However, what must be remembered is that each organization itself is a market in itself. It has different functions, it has a different mandate, has characteristics and different requirements. So this then obviously translates into a vast amount of market opportunity for companies to do business with. Now, what is UNGEM's role in all of this? In essence, UNGEM was developed to facilitate access to suppliers or global supplier community to the UN market. So really is to help suppliers find their way through this labyrinth of organizations and to be able to, of course, promote their goods and services to the agencies of the UN. And in that way, enter into business with them. So in other words, the UN Global Marketplace really is the official procurement portal of the UN system. It's been designed as, one, a mechanism to register vendors, for vendors to register their interest of doing business with the organizations of the UN. But the flip side of that, of course, is also as a vendor sourcing system. So in other words, that it is used by procurement officers of the UN to identify vendors that they can do business with. So from that perspective, it's really the gateway. It's the gateway for companies to get in touch with the UN system. Through the United Nations Global Marketplace, you have access to 31 UN agencies. Now, these 31 UN agencies, incidentally, account for 98% of the $30 billion that you saw earlier, that is the annual procurement volume. So in essence, once you've registered on UNGM, you've expressed or you've shown interest on doing business to these 31 agencies. The underlying principle of UNGM is as soon as you're registered and have been accepted or registered with one organization, you are visible to all users or to all procurement staff. So in essence, and currently there are 20,000 UN staff members registered on UNGM. These are not only procurement staff, these are also program managers, project officers. In essence, any UN staff has access to the system. So that means that once you've registered, these 20,000 individuals have access to your profile. Currently, there are over 400,000 companies registered on UNGM. Now, what are the primary functions from a vendor perspective of UNGM? UNGM provides a vendor with a single registration point. So in other words, there's one single registration process that enables you to register your interest in doing business with these 31 agencies. These 31 agencies have agreed on a harmonized approach or criteria, etc., that they use for registration. It also provides you with access to UN business opportunities. UN agencies post their procurement opportunities or tender notices or procurement notices, as they're often called, on UNGM. It really consolidates the entire, when a UN agency goes to market, it consolidates all these tender notices in one location. And of course, the other main point from a vendor perspective is that UNGM disseminates relevant procurement information. In other words, it acts as a repository of procurement information that is relevant or of value to you when you're looking to do business with the UN, when you're looking to do market research on the United Nations. In essence, doing business with the UN is like doing business with any other market. One must do a little bit of market research in order to understand how this market functions. And this is where UNGM provides you with the relevant information to do that. I'll speak to that a little bit later in this presentation when I talk about the Knowledge Center and the resources that we have there. In terms of the registration process, it's relatively simple. It currently takes companies to about 10 to 15 minutes to complete the registration process. So there are 6 different questions or sections that you need to complete. Obviously, ranging from simple general information in terms of address, etc., the countries that you would like to do business in, contacts. So in other words, you of course need to provide some context so that we can of course contact you. And an important component is the coding of your goods and services that you wish to promote or offer to the UN agencies. This is an important aspect, and we do encourage you to spend a little bit of time on this to get this right, because the coding system that we use underlies the entire UNGM system. So in other words, it is what you use to identify the goods and services that you can offer. It is the system that is used by the UN staff to search for companies when they're looking for suppliers of computer equipment, agricultural equipment, or whatever it may be. And of course, it is also the system that is used when identifying or coding the tender notices. In other words, describing what is being required by these agencies. And I'll talk a little bit more detail in regards to the tender notices in a moment. But in essence, the registration, once you're registered, you increase your exposure to the UN to the UN procurement staff, UN staff in general. And one of the underlying principles, of course, is to provide equal opportunities for suppliers, regardless of their size. An interesting fact to note here is that over 75% of the registered companies, of the over 400,000 companies registered on UNGEM, are actually small and medium-sized enterprises. Another interesting aspect is data that from in terms of UN procurement, the majority of UN procurement, roughly about between 75 and 80% of it, is actually for contracts under $50,000. And this makes, there are of course huge or large contracts in the UN system, but the majority are actually relatively small. So this makes the UN system or the UN procurement market a very attractive market for companies or small, medium-sized enterprises, particularly companies as they are starting out, perhaps wanting to move into an international environment. One of the other aspects of the UN procurement market, which is quite interesting, particularly for SMEs, is that it is a relatively safe market. UN agencies cannot go to market unless they have the funding secured for whatever it is that they're going to procure. So as long as the contractual obligations are met and the supplier delivers what he has proposed, he will be paid. So from that perspective, it is a safe market for companies to move into. And of course, registration is more and more becoming a requirement to participate in procurement opportunities. And this is because the majority of agencies are now using e-procurement systems. In fact, of the 31 agencies, 17 of them have integrated their e-procurement systems with UNGM. What this means is that in order to participate in e-procurement processes, you do need to be registered in UNGM because it is the entrance point where you express interest in these tenders. And that'll become a little bit more clearer when I talk about the actual tender processes. Now, but in terms of registration, there are 3 registration levels. There's a basic level, level 1 and level 2. Basic level is the mandatory process. You need to be registered at the basic level. Now, level 1 and 2, some agencies do use these levels, in essence, to gather more information on the company. So that could be, for instance, that is, for instance, information on level 1 in terms of references. And level 2 would be audited financial accounts. Now, these levels are used in addition to, or are determined by monetary value of potential contracts. So having said that, level 1 and 2 are only being used by 6 agencies, and the system will let you know when you do need to register or complete these levels. But when you want, I think the important message of this slide is you need to register at the basic level. And again, this process takes about 10 to 15 minutes. Now, in terms of the registration process, please provide the company name as it is written in the certificate of incorporation. This is quite important. You will, of course, be reminded throughout the registration process to do so, but it's a good note to make. And of course, that the company's information is updated on a regular basis, and particularly the contact details. And after you've registered, is to be proactive. So in other words, frequently log in and monitor business opportunities. Now, we have a way of monitoring the business opportunities automatically, but it's also important to be proactive and to keep logging in on a regular basis. It also allows us to know that you are still there, that you're still interested in doing business. Now, in terms of the business opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, UNGEM consolidates the UN agencies' opportunities into one location. Now, these are free to access at any given time. Actually, you do not even need to be registered to access them. You can access UNGEM and look at the opportunities. And there are usually over 1,000 active procurement opportunities at any one time. So obviously that is quite an extensive list. So there is a search functionality. There's ways of course, being able to drill down into that. What we do have is what we call the tender alert service. Now, this is the only aspect that we do charge for. So registration, everything else in UNGM is free of charge. The tender alert service is something that we charge for. It's on an annual basis. It's roughly $250. Although we do often have promotions that bring that price down a little bit. It is actually the mechanism that we use to fund the UNGM. What this tender alert service does, it, again, using the coding system, it provides you or sends you emails once there is a tender, or as soon as there is a tender published by any of the organizations that match the goods and services that you can provide. So it makes it a little easier to keep abreast of what is in the pipeline, what are the procurement opportunities that are currently active. So what does this look like? So in essence, what we see here is an excerpt of the list of procurement opportunities. And the two aspects or 2 points I'd like to make here is the method of participation. Now, I mentioned electronic procurement earlier. Now, and that agents or many agencies, 17 in fact, have integrated their e-procurement processes with UNGM. So when an e-procurement process posts automatically a tender on UNGM, what you will see is that this express interest button that you see there is highlighted in blue, which means it's active. So that actually enables you to express interest in that particular tender notice. So what will happen when you express interest, and you can only do this, of course, once you're registered, is that the system will take you to that agency's e-procurement system, and then you can follow on the process in terms of submitting the tender, etc., from there on. If it's not highlighted, it means that it is a hard copy or that is a traditional tender, if you will. In other words, that the reply or response to this tender is by hard copy or email. And to do that, you simply click on the link in this tender, i.e. the blue underlined tender title, and follow the instructions in terms of how to reply to that tender. Now, I mentioned the Knowledge Center a little earlier. It centralizes a wealth of information and resources. I mean, it does this for the vendor community, it does this for the UN user community, but from a vendor perspective, what you will find there is information or detailed information on the United Nations system, on the procurement profiles of the organizations. So information on the organizations, what are their mandates, what fields do they work in, what are their requirements, any particularities in regards to their procurement. You will find information on the UN market. In other words, also tips and tricks in terms of how to do business with the UN agencies. And you will also find information on UN business centers, such as this one, for instance. I mentioned the annual statistical report earlier. Again, this is also, you will also find this information on the Knowledge Center. And here, you're able to really do a deep dive into the data, into the procurement data to see which agency buys what, in what volumes, etc., and possibly also you can actually see who are the companies that supply the agencies. So it is actually part of the whole, in order to ensure that we maintain a transparent approach to the UN procurement. And last but not least, we also have a fully fledged help center. So there are actually two ways to access this. You'll find a button on the right-hand top of every page of UNGM, as well as on the bottom right-hand. The bottom right-hand is actually a bot, where if you put in a search term or whatever it is you're looking for, it will come up with suggested articles. The help center has, I think, over 300 different articles to help you navigate the UNGM to do what you need to do in UNGM. It does this very easy to understand articles with screenshots, etc. If, however, after having searched the articles and you cannot find the answer you're looking for, you can, of course, contact our help desk, where you're able to get in contact with a person, and of course we will be able to assist you in whatever the issue is from that perspective. So, ladies and gentlemen, that was really very much a very quick dive, or not so much deep dive, but look at the UNGM. And I, at this stage, would like to open the floor for questions if you have any. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Ram. We have two questions from Kyiv to you. And, так, хто хоче поставити питання? Будь ласка, піднімайте.
Well, those who wish actually to put a question, so please raise your hands. Maybe in that part of the audience. Okay, we have a question. There are two questions actually. Good afternoon. My question is regarding reporting. Let's say the different tenders which took already place. We heard from the previous speakers that the tenders to the tune over $100,000 are published, and to a smaller amount they're not published. Can you give us an example of the UNGM's website where we can find the information about those tenders which already were implemented or had taken place? Thank you.
Certainly. What you will find on the gem is contract awards. In other words, agencies upload, as they upload the procurement notices, they also upload contract awards. After the procurement process and the contract award, a notification is uploaded to say that who the contract is awarded to, the value of that contract. So that is one way to be able to put the process from procurement notice through the process and to the eventual award. Now, it depends on the agency in terms of at what level or what threshold they upload the contract awards. Some agencies, in terms of their policy, and this is where we have, while procurement is general, the procurement procedures are generally very similar across all agencies, but this is one of the areas where they do differ. Some agencies upload contract awards as of 100,000, others at 50,000, others at 30. It really depends on the agency. But nevertheless, you will be able to find the contract awards on UNGM. This is one location where you can find them. The other is, of course, in the annual statistical report, which reports on contracts and purchase orders placed, and generally over $30,000, I believe, is the threshold there. But of course, while the contract awards on the site are more or less more active or more real time, if you will, the annual statistical report reports on the previous year. I hope that answers the question.
We have one question again.
Good afternoon. My name is Alexei. I have the following question. We cooperate with the IOM, International Organization Migration, and we actually implemented a couple of projects regarding the international marketplace system. So my question is why we don't see active tenders with IOM in this system? Thank you.
Again, it is up to the agencies when they publish the procurement notices. Now, I would need to look into what IOM is doing. I do believe they do publish notices on UNGM, but I would have to verify that. It also depends on how many notices they publish or how many procurement tenders they publish on an annual basis. What you will see is there are some agencies that publish many or quite extensive procurement notices, such as UNOPS, for instance, UNPD, others, UNICEF, etc. Other agencies, smaller agencies, may not have such a high volume. So that would be the reason for that. But I would really need to have a look at the system to see what IOM is doing, publishing in the way of notices. But I do know that IOM uses UNGM to register their vendors. And as such, we're currently actually working with them to integrate the e-procurement system. So if they're not publishing at the moment, they will certainly be doing so as soon as the system their e-procurement system has been implemented.
Thanks a lot for your presentation, for your answer, and have a good day. А ми продовжуємо роботу.
We continue our work. Sorry for some technical problems. I believe that you understand. Thank you for your understanding. If you did not get anything, I did not understand, we are going to have the recording of this presentation and the Ukrainian questions to Mr. Ram. Now the closing remarks, Anna Lekarleta, the coordinator, the representative of the Coordination Office UN in Ukraine. Anna, you have the floor.
Much longer because it's been quite an intense afternoon, and the most important work of the day is starting now, when you have a chance to really go outside and do what was suggested by all of the representatives of the UN agencies here today, which was to talk one-on-one with our procurement officers and really get an understanding of how our systems function. So I would just like to thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. I would like to thank the Kyiv Chamber of Commerce and Industry for partnering with us as the United Nations entities here in Ukraine on this event, because it's a very important event for us here in Ukraine, for the 24 entities that are here on the ground working with the government, with communities, with the private sector. But it's also a very good example that I've already shared with globally the UN in terms of the huge turnout and interest when we really do, in a concerted fashion, approach the private sector and the business community. So thank you to you. Thank you to the businesses of the private sector in Ukraine. We had 1,400 registrations. You were here in the room. You were online on Zoom, on Facebook Live, on YouTube. The recording will be placed tomorrow. So we see this as the first step really in what is a larger engagement for us, because we really wanted to have this dialogue to, pull back the curtain, to open up the box so that many of the questions that we see from the small pool of vendors that we currently have, that we can share with a much wider audience, and that we can demonstrate that this is a dialogue for us. We want to engage, we want to answer your questions, we want to hear your feedback on the process so that we can improve where we can, and where we have very strict rules related to our audits, our financial accountability, that we explain that, and that we work with you to help you to apply. So really there were some very concrete steps that we heard and tips. So really, register for the UNGM. It's in English, but it's also in all of the official languages of the United Nations. So you will be able to browse it and understand it. And there is so much useful information on that website. Browse the UN in Ukraine website, because we have links to all of the agencies, the 24 agencies, and the information that they're posting. UNOP spoke about the online trainings. If we don't already have that translated in Ukrainian, we will do that, and we will put that online. Those UNOPS trainings are very helpful for helping you understand how to successfully engage in UN procurement processes. And I would say be persistent. Don't apply once and not win a tender and give up. Be persistent and look at this as an investment in the future. The UN stands with Ukraine. We will be here for as many years as it takes for Ukraine to recover, and that we know it will be years. And so look at it as an investment in the years of procurement processes that are coming up. But then also look at it as an investment in the future, when you can take your experience as the private sector in Ukraine in humanitarian and recovery work and export that all around the world to other countries that the UN is partnering with and supporting. So I'll end just by saying thank you to the team of the United Nations and of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and of the Kyiv Chamber of Commerce and Industry that worked together really for 2 months now to put this event together. And I think that, the fact that we started this day with standing room capacity, not even standing room capacity, that we were crammed into this room for some very important messages at the beginning, and that we've had people, all afternoon filtering throughout the reception area discussing the type of business opportunities and market that will be coming to Ukraine. I think it speaks a lot to the work of our colleagues that put this together. So thank you to them, and thank you to all of you for attending. And thank you to our wonderful moderator.
Thank you. Thank you, пані Анно. Що ж мені залишається подякувати.
Well, the only thing I have to do is just to thank everyone who joined us here in Kyiv, physically and the online participants, and thank the organizers of this forum, UN, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Kyiv Chamber of Commerce. But this brings us only to the end of one part of our forum. Now we are going to have networking, and very important stage of exchanging the contacts, time for question and answers, some specifying questions, and the organizers really hope that this closing part, networking, will be very fruitful, productive. So I call upon you not to leave this place and to be proactive. We actually can still have a cup of tea or coffee, which we missed during our work, and continue our work. May I wish you success in your business, the victory and peace all over the world, which is critically important.